Well, my name is Adam. I'm the coach of the Titletown Tyrantrums, part of the National Exhibition Syndicate. We are a draft-style battle league. You can find us on Reddit if you want to keep up with our battles or if you're interested in joining in future seasons. This is officially my second season with the NES. Our first season was considered more of a test season. We wanted to see if we could get everything up and running, get all the things set up so that we could handle a full season with a full roster of teams. So for our first official test season, we moved up to 16 teams, which meant that when we drafted, a lot more Pokemon are going to be taken. A lot of things that you might have wanted that maybe would have been there with 9-10 teams were no longer going to be there with 16. So we're going to go over what I drafted for this first official season. I'll tell you some of my logic behind why I drafted some things that I'm kind of bummed I wasn't able to get, and we'll go from there. So, as you can see on the screen in front of you, the first Pokemon that I chose in round 1 was Mew. I went into this draft with the goal of getting 4 Pokemon. I wanted Mew, I wanted Mega Pinsir, I wanted Milotic, and I wanted Excadrill. Those 4 Pokemon were essentially the core of what I ran last season, and I knew that getting all 4 of them was extremely unlikely, if not impossible. But I was going to try anyway because I knew how to work with them, I knew more or less what I could do with them, and I felt comfortable building a team with really anything if I was able to get most, if not all, of those Pokemon. So when it got to pick 6, which is where I fell in the first round, and Mew was still available, of course I was going to take it. I knew it probably would not last through the first round and most of the second round coming back to me. So I took it. It can do a lot of things. Most people know it has 100 base stats across the board, can learn just about every single move there is. It can be physical, it can be special, it can be bulky, it can be a cleric, it can be a hazard setter. It can do just about whatever you want it to do. So I don't think I really have to say much on what role it's going to play because there really isn't a specific role it's going to play. It's going to fill whatever niche I need to fill that week. So, here's Mew. He's part of the team. Welcome to the Tyrantrums, friend. Moving on into the second round, I elected to take Mega Pinsir. Between the first round at pick 6 and the second round at pick, 29, 30, whatever it was that I went in snake order, Excadrill had been taken, which was unfortunate. Mega Gardevoir had been taken, which was sort of my backup if I wasn't able to get Mega Pinsir, and so when it was gone I was like, well, if Mega Pinsir goes too, what am I going to do? And also Jolteon was taken. I was really hoping that Jolteon would last a few rounds and I could add it because everybody wants, the fast electric type that can go in, deal damage, probably switch out. It's so crucial in a draft format. You can't say enough how important fast electric types are. But then it came back to me in the second round and Mega Pinsir was still there. I think that a lot of people, they don't see what you can do with Mega Pinsir. They know the common ones that everybody wants to take, Mega Venusaur, Mega Charizard, X, Mega Lopunny, and Mega Pinsir sign gets brushed under the table. And so when it was there still, I wanted it. I used it in the test season. Of course I was going to take it again. Its attack stat is out of this world at 155. Its defense stat is actually surprisingly good at 120. The biggest problem it has, of course, is that it is weak to Stealth Rocks, but there are a few defoggers that I managed to pick up in the draft, so I'm not too worried about Stealth Rocks. And also, regular Pinsir only takes 25%, so as long as you aren't planning on switching it in and out many times, you can get it in once and just do as much damage as possible before it goes down. I don't think there will be a problem. So then I had to only wait a couple picks to go into my third round pick because I was near the beginning of the draft, so when it came back to me again, Milotic was still there. That was, number 3 of my 4. Of course, the 4th Excadrill had been taken in the first. So I saw Milotic, and I didn't even have to think, I'm taking Milotic in the third, it is mine, you can all back off. Milotic tends to play, a couple different roles. It's mostly specially defensive, but it has a lot of HP, so it can take some physical hits if it has to. It's mostly for bulk, it can, status summon if it has to, it gets Confuse Ray, it gets Toxic. It can Dragon Tail to phase out Pokemon that are setting up after it hopefully takes a hit. It gets Competitive and Marvel Scale both are excellent abilities that it can work with. And, all around, I love Milotic. I think I brought it to all but maybe one match last season, and even then, You know, it's hard to predict, well, is something crazy going to be on my low tick? You never know. Special attack at 100 is absolutely nothing to laugh at either, so I'm really glad that through these first 3 rounds I was able to get 3 Pokemon that I really wanted to work with. Moving on, after my low tick was taken, Scolipede was taken, and I was actually hoping to pick up Scolipede as a physical sweeper to use, you know, near the end game, to kind of take over for where Excadrill was leaving a hole in my physical offense. And then Scolipede, when it was taken, I kind of, you know, had to rethink, well, what am I going to go for in the next round? And of course I had plenty of time to wait to go through the other 10 teams and back through them again. And then Galvantula was still there. As I mentioned before, fast electric types are absolutely something that every single person wants to get on their team, whether they realize it or not. You know, having access to a Volt Switch and having access to, you know, a high special attack stat like Galvantula and Jolteon have, it's just too invaluable to really put a price on, and so when Galvantula was there, I remember it managed to fall quite a few rounds in our test season draft, and then when someone picked it, I'm like, oh, I should have picked up Galvantula for my team. This time I wasn't going to make the same mistake, so I picked up Galvantula. Obviously, 108 speed stat is absolutely nothing to laugh at. It's going to outspeed a lot of the base 100, base 105 as long as you invest fully. You don't even have to Scarf it to take those things out. And really, its main purposes are to Volt Switch. Also, I have access now to Sticky Webs. You know, there's not a lot to say that Galvantula isn't good for, besides the fact that maybe it's not the heaviest hitter, and because it's a bug type, it can't switch in repeatedly into Stealth Rocks, which maybe Jolteon could do a couple more times. But I'm happy that I was able to pick it up. I think that it'll be a very helpful addition to a team that desperately needed some Volt switching momentum that didn't quite have. So then moving on to round 5, I managed to pick up Mienshao. I know in previous season I had taken Machamp as like my physical offensive presence. That wasn't my Mega, and that wasn't Excadrill. I wanted one more, you know, heavy physical hitter. It's great to Assault Vest Machamp. The problem was it was just so slow, and really, you know, for all I wanted to do, it couldn't take hits as well as I wanted. I feel like I really kind of, you know, didn't use it to the potential that some people might. So this season, instead of picking a Pokemon I wasn't super comfortable using, I ended up picking Mienshao. Obviously, it has a couple different things it can do. It gets Inner Focus, Regenerator, and Reckless. All 3 are good abilities. Obviously, Regenerator is more for a bulky set. You want to U-turn in and out, and of course it gets access to U-turn, so that's nothing to laugh at. Regenerator, it can keep it alive a lot longer than maybe I could have kept it out with Machamp, where I always let it die. Inner Focus, obviously, it can't be made to flinch. I don't think that flinching is necessarily as common in draft as it would be in maybe VGC formats, but I still think that Inner Focus, if I think that I'm going to get faked out potentially by Mega Lopunny, and I want to slam it with a high jump kick, then I can. Otherwise, Reckless works well with high jump kick, allowing it to hit even harder. Of course, the problem being that high jump kick is such a risky move that you really don't want to abuse it and risk losing half of your HP, especially if you don't have Regenerator to get it back. So there are some things to consider with Mienshao. Obviously, it doesn't have quite the elemental punch coverage maybe that Machamp had, but I'm glad that I have it. I think it'll be an interesting member to the team, and I'm curious to see how it performs. Obviously, 105 speed stat, nothing to laugh at, just like Galvantula. I think that it'll put in enough work that it'll justify being picked in the 5th round. For the 6th round, I picked my first free agent. It is a free agent from, I believe, Tier 4, or Tier 3, might be Tier 3. But I picked Roserade. I thought it is a surprisingly efficient Pokemon to use. It is relatively fast with 90 speed. It is bulky as all heck on the special side with 105 special defense. And its special attack is ridiculous at 125. I think a lot of people don't realize just how useful Roserade can potentially be because it just doesn't seem like the kind of Pokemon you'd want to use. But then you go to its abilities and it gets Technician. So anything with 60 power or lower is multiplied by 1.5, including Struggle. And I think that it can be an offensive threat that most people aren't expecting. It can also be a special defensive wall if it has to be. I think that last season I picked Tangrowth as my sort of bulky grass type, and I liked it. I didn't use it as much as some people probably will, because I don't play much for bulk, whereas I prefer to hit harder and just kind of stay alive in the process. So I think that having something that's a little bit more offensive minded, but still can take a hit or two, is going to fit my playstyle better, and that's why I elected to take Roserade. Moving on to the 7th round, I used Noivern last season, and I think that its biggest assets are its speed, and the fact that with a Life Orb, Draco Meteor, it can hit harder than you expect. With its speed stat, it can outspeed most things that it has to that aren't Scarfed. It gets access to a lot of crazy things like Psychic, Dark Pulse, Super Fang, U-Turn, Draco Meteor, Flamethrower, which of course I didn't run once last season and lost a match because of it, and will never make the same mistake again. But when Noivern was still there, I still needed my tier 4, and I thought, you know what? If I don't like it, I can swap it out for something else later, but it definitely is. It plays very well to my style of kind of being a little bit bulky, but more so just hits very, very hard and can keep hitting. That's really all I have to say on it. It gets Frisk and Infiltrator, which are both, relatively alright abilities if someone tries to throw up a substitute and I don't want to Boom Burst. I can still hit with different attacks. Or Frisk. I know Frisk can be good if you don't know what items are. I tended to run Frisk more than I tended to run Infiltrator last season, just because I could get Boom Burst and could hit through subs if I had to. Moving on to pick 8 of the draft. At this point, a lot of the bulky Steel types were starting to go, and I realized that I needed something defensively bulky that could also be a hazard setter, and conveniently enough, in this case, a defogger. So I picked Skarmory. It was a tier 1 free agent, and it gets wonderful abilities. You can see here it gets Keen Eye, so it can't be lowered, not that we use accuracy, but Sturdy is what I think is important, because if it can survive any hit from full health, that means that it can roost up, get out of there, whatever it has to do. Its defense is 140, which is absolutely just nuts. Attack, not the worst at 80, but mostly what it's going to be used for is a physically defensive wall and to throw up hazards if it has to. It can whirlwind things repeatedly into the hazards, just, because it can. I think that picking it was, maybe not the only pick that I could have made, but at the time I thought, you know what, Skarmory will fit the team nicely. It is not as weak to rocks as some of the Pokemon that I picked before it. It can defog them away, and it can put up its own. So, in that instance, I thought that Skarmory was the best pick, and so we're rolling with it. After that, I knew that I could still pick a couple tier 4 free agents, so I picked up Slurpuff. Obviously, at this point in the draft, there weren't an exceptional amount of good fairy types left. I think that just about at this point, they were kind of picked clean. But I remember that Slurpuff kind of gained infamy in the beginning of X and Y because it could unburden after using Belly Drum and its Citrus Berry. So it could be an offensive threat if it has to. It can also use its special attack, which is actually the higher of the two stats. Without Belly Drum, it can get Calm Mind. It is just, none of its stats are spectacular, but also none of them are bad. So obviously it can absorb Dragon type hits. It can, go out and dish a couple hard hits if it has to. But I think the thing that just amazed me the most is it learns so many good moves. It can Cleric with Aromatherapy. It can Cotton Guard. It can get Heal Belt. It can Light Screen. It can Magikarp. I mean, look at this. This is just... It gets a ridiculous amount of different moves that it can use, and so I think that I can use it in a couple different ways, and people won't necessarily know what's coming if they see it in the team preview, because it's hard to prepare for something that can be physical, special, and cleric, just like people have a hard time preparing for Mew. Obviously stats aren't as good as Mew, but for where I picked it in the draft, I'm not complaining at all. The next thing that I picked, I didn't really have a specific reason besides I thought that it might be a nice change of pace. So I picked up Frostlass as another free agent. I didn't really use a lot of my free agents last season. I really only used my Stoutland on my Sand team and in week 1. So I wanted to pick a Pokemon that I could bring to different matches and would have different uses. So I picked up Frostlass. It can be a Suicide Leaf with Spikes, it can Destiny Bond, it can Shadow Ball, it can Ice Beam, it can do, Hail Snowcloak antics. I mostly just thought if I'm going to use my free agent picks on a tier 4, I'm going to pick a tier 4 that can be used for a couple different things and doesn't necessarily only fit a small role, which I think the problem was when I picked Stoutland. So Frostlass is here, 110 speed, again, is spectacular. It can outspeed a lot and hit it. Not, super hard, but hard enough. And for its abilities, it does get Curse Body, so it can disable a move when it goes out, which you never know could save you in some battle that you bring in. And so finally, it was the last round of the draft. We were 3-some hours in, we were all tired. We wanted to go to bed. And I still had to pick a tier 5. I had not picked a tier 5 yet in this draft. Tier 5 was of the few good mons that were in it that I thought about maybe drafting. They were mostly picked clean. I wasn't going to pick Malamar again. So I saw Steelix was still available. And now I watch a lot of matches. I've seen Steelix be drafted most recently by A-Drive on YouTube in his, I believe, the UCL or the GBA, one of the two. And I saw Steelix and I'm like, you know what? Can't hurt. It'll do more than my Malamar did. So I looked at it. HP and defense alone, I mean, if you need a defensive wall, this is where you're going every day of the week. Attack, not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. Abilities, it can get Sturdy, it can get Sheer Force if you want to use it for an attacker, or it can get Rockhead if you want to Life Orb it for whatever reason. You do you. And so I picked Steelix, and I'm like, you know what? We're going to go with it. I'm not quite sure what role it's necessarily going to fill at this point, but I definitely think that I can find uses for it in ways that I couldn't find uses for essentially what was my wasted 11th pick in our first draft. I know it gets some good moves. It can be used just to bulk some stuff out. I'm not going to rule out using it as a physical attacker, but speed stat kind of makes you not as likely to want to run it as your offensive sweeper. But hey, if I'm going to assault infest it, I'm going all out. So that is my team. You can see both sets here. Again, I picked Mew in the first, Mega Pinsir in the second, Milotic in the third, Galvantula in the fourth, Mienshao in the fifth, Roserade in the sixth, Noivern in the seventh, Skymarie in the eighth, Slurpup in the ninth, Frostlass in the 10th, and finally Steelix in the 11th. I'm looking forward to using this team. I'm kind of sad that I didn't get to add Excadrill to round out, the consistencies of my first season team, but I think that this team will challenge me to battle in ways that I don't normally because I haven't used a lot of these Pokemon. I've only seen them used or kind of know what their general use has been in the past. But I think that it will kind of, if anything, it will make me a better battler and team builder for the future. I'm glad I got the 3 Pokemon that I wanted in the first 3 rounds, Mew, Milotic, and Mega Pinsir, and I really can't complain too much beyond that. Most people can't draft all the Pokemon that they want. So, if you have any questions, hit me up. Otherwise, it has been a pleasure. I hope I did not bore you in any sense of the word, and I will see you all next time.